Welcome back to the Philosophy of Religion with me, your host, Dr. Kovach. Okay, long time no see. Sorry it took me a while to follow up with you. Yours was the tough group to decide what to do with. You know, of the four classes I teach, yours was the one that was the trickiest for me to figure out how to rebalance the rest of the semester. My freshmen, that was easy. I just had to record the rest of my lectures for this semester, put them on YouTube, and they're good to go. All their assignments stay pretty much the same. My theology and science students, they're having fun. We're doing blog posts, things like that. You were the tough ones, because you were always the different class this semester. Your class was presentation-based. You were doing a great job with those presentations, too, by the way. You all got, credit for your presentations, and if you didn't do a presentation, you're still getting credit for it. And also, I was really looking forward to the end of the semester when we were going to meet to talk about your journals. A couple of you have emailed me about the journal project. Here's what I have to say. These are interesting times we're living in. If you've never kept a journal in your life, now's the time to start. Now is the time. You know what? I forgot to bring my journal with. Oh, by the way, where am I? I'm in Fort Myers, Florida. I had to get out of LA for various reasons. I flew to Fort Myers, Florida. I'm staying with my mother. As soon as I got here, because I flew through LAX, I immediately self-quarantined. I am self-quarantined right now in a room in my mom's house in Fort Myers, Florida. And I forgot to pack my journal with me, my own journal. So what am I doing? I've got all these exams that students did, and I'm using the last page of each exam, because the last page of each student's exam was blank, to keep a new journal, my coronavirus journal, which someday will be clipped together, stapled together, just like a post-apocalyptic journal should be. What about you? This is a great time to keep a journal. If you've never kept a journal, start. And if you don't if the idea of writing a journal is too much for you, start a video journal. Start a video log, just like what I'm doing right now. Start a clip book of photographs, just something that someday, when people ask you, and they will ask you, what was the coronavirus scare of 2020 like? You'll be able to show them your journal. You'll be able to show them your video blog, something like that. Don't panic. That was just a cough. It's not the coronavirus. You can't get coronavirus from watching a YouTube video. Don't worry about that. So, before I talk about divine simplicity, which ain't so simple, by the way, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the rest of this semester looks like for you. So you've done 2 exams so far. Those 2 exams will constitute 50% of your grade. By the way, the second exam was really good. All the scores were pretty... One student, I won't say who, one did get, I think, a bad grade. 2 bad grades. There was one F, there was one D. Otherwise, the class average was a B+. It was like 88, 89%. A couple of C pluses in there, lots of A's. And by the way, if you didn't see in a previous email, chances are the university's going to go to for this semester, pass-fail format. So even if you have been struggling with this class for whatever reason, most likely on your transcript, it'll just show pass. Do the work. Don't start half-assing it now. You're going to get the pass. If you're concerned about your grade, if you're scared, email me. The university is looking at a system where if you really want your transcript to show a letter grade, you'll be able to petition for that. I don't know the details yet. I don't even know if we're going to really go to this pass-fail thing. Every other school in the country has. Every other school in the country switched to online evaluations 10 years ago. LMU last year. What can I say? We love our school. Stay true to your school. Okay. If you have questions about your grade, email me. Otherwise, don't let that stuff be freaking you out right now. The world is crazy and stressful and unpredictable enough as is. that the last thing you need to be worrying about is, what is meat old man Kovac going to do to your grade? So, philosophy of religion, what have we been talking about? Well, we talked about different approaches to the question of God. We talked about classical theism versus theistic personalism. We talked about arguments for the existence of God and criticisms of those arguments. What were the different kinds of arguments we considered? We considered cosmological arguments. Cosmological arguments are meant to show that there's features of the universe which ought to be causally accounted for, but which cannot be causally accounted for by other features of the universe. We talked about ontological arguments. Ontological arguments are meant to show that there has to be a necessary being, that the very notion of God proves that a necessary being must exist. That's what proponents of ontological arguments claim. Of course, looks to me like there's a problem with ontological arguments, namely that they treat existence as if they're some sort of real property of individuals. Lastly, we looked at so-called design arguments, arguments that the universe has some sort of a fundamental purpose, fundamental regularity, some sort of fundamental design built into it that can only be explained by some sort of intelligent designer. We shouldn't confuse design arguments with what now passes for intelligent design arguments. I mean, design arguments have been around for several hundred years. They come in a number of varieties, varying levels of sophistication. They're especially popular, though, with the so-called theistic personalists. Remember them? What's the theistic personalists' credo number one, their mantra above all mantras? A mantra to be praised like no other mantra. The mantra to be hailed amongst the theistic personalists is, God is a person. That is the theistic personalist. I know it's been a long time since we went over this. It's been a long time. It was like a different world when we started talking about this stuff. We were happy. We had a bright future ahead of us. That was before the coronavirus. Oh. Get some water. Huh? What's difficult about the self-quarantine is that I don't have any alcohol. No, I'm kidding. The most difficult thing about the self-quarantine is that I'm in Florida. So, let's think about classical theism a bit for a moment. Classical theism, of course, is a position which starts by being in awe of creation. And what do I mean by creation? Do you say, oh, he means creationism? No. Don't confuse the notion of creation with our contemporary notion of creationists. No. Very different things. I don't think Aquinas should be called a creationist. That's not what Aquinas is up to. The classical theist, like Aquinas, is up to the question, why anything at all instead of nothing whatsoever? That's the primary question for the classical theist. Why anything at all instead of nothing whatsoever? And, according to the classical theist, if you admit that as a reasonable question, then you can count yourself theist. Remember, the classical theist doesn't claim to know what God is. The classical theist doesn't claim to know the answer to the question, why anything at all instead of nothing whatsoever. They simply claim that it's a legitimate question. But notice that whatever it is that answers that question, whatever it is that answers the question, why anything at all instead of nothing whatsoever, the answer cannot be one of the things. We cannot point to one of the things on the list of everything and say, there, that's the one. That's the answer to the question, why anything at all instead of nothing whatsoever. As soon as we do that, we're back to where we started, because we can say, why that? You see, classical theism is meant to block the question, how come God? Why God? Wherefore the divine? Classical theism says that the answer to the question, why anything at all instead of nothing whatsoever, can't be one more thing. It has to be a mystery that lies somehow behind the list of everything. My brain hurts just thinking about it. This is like the most difficult thing. Because my mind can only think about the things. My mind can only think about stuff. My mind can think about fictional things, but it thinks about them as if they were one of them. I can think about leprechauns, because I can think about what would the universe be like if there were leprechauns. I can play the pretend game. What if the universe were such that it included little magic Irishmen who live at the other end of the rainbow and hoard gold? Right? I can think about leprechauns because I can think about them as if they were one more thing. But I cannot think about God, because I cannot think about God as if God were one more thing, according to the classical theist. Oh, this is a problem. This is tricky. This is where divine simplicity comes in. And let me warn you, divine simplicity, not so simple. No, no. So what is divine simplicity? Divine simplicity is just this. Divine simplicity is the claim that in God there is no distinction between this and that. And that in everything other than God there will be some distinction between this and that. Let's look at some thises and thatses in me. I'm a human. I have hair. I'm 5'10". I'm in Florida. I'm an American citizen. I'm rather dull. I have no sense of humor. I have 2 eyes. And I can run a mile in 10 minutes. Okay. I just listed 8 things about myself, and they're all different. They're all different. They can change without changing one another. I'm a human being. So are you. So are you. So are you. I'm a human being. I'm 5'10". Are you 5'10"? Maybe. There's a difference between being a human being and being 5'10". Those are different things. There's a difference between being 5'10" and having hair. Those are I could lose my height. You could lop off my legs, chop them off, and I would still have hair. I would still be a human being, for that matter, provided we bandaged me up quick enough. So, created things, that is to say, all the things that we call the universe, created things are, here's a fancy philosophy word coming, here comes the fancy philosophy word. The created things are composite. They're composed. What's composed mean? It means put together out of different things, out of different this and that's. I'm composed out of my humanity, my 5'10"ness, my brown hair, my 2 eyes, my ability to run a mile in 10 minutes, and my total lack of any sense of humor. I'm composed of different facts, let's say. So are you. So is every created thing, including concepts. A concept is made of a genus, a group that it belongs to, and a difference. The concept humanity. Humanity. What's it made up out of? It's made up out of a group, we call it a genus, animality, and a difference, rationality. That's what makes humanity different from everything else under animality. There's other things that fall under animality. Kitty catness, penguinness. But if you want to talk about humanity, that concept, you have to add in animality plus rationality, this and that. So, if God isn't one of the things, if God's not one more thing there to be spoken of, well, raises some very interesting implications. For one thing, it rules out God from being in any way material, being a physical thing. After all the physical things, all the physical items are things. But we've said God is what's responsible for there being anything at all instead of nothing whatsoever. So God can't be a material object. Okay. What else can this tell us? Well, what else can we rule out? We can rule out God belonging to any group. Right? If God's not a material thing, how will God be grouped? What group can include God and other things? This goes along with the claim earlier that God can't belong to that the universe and God don't add up to two. Remember that claim? Remember that claim? Think about it for a moment. Think about it. Sorry, I'm back. So, God and the universe don't add up to two, right? God belongs to no group. God doesn't even, it's not even that God has his own group or her own group that God belongs to. God is totally different in this sense. So God's not made up of physical parts. God's not a member of a group. And crucial here is God is not separate from the properties that we speak of when we speak about God. This is really one of the most controversial parts of this idea of divine simplicity. The idea here is that in some ways there's a dependence relationship between me and the things you could say. So take an example of my knowledge. I have some knowledge. There's a few things I know. My knowledge is distinct from what I am, right? You can also know the same things I know. I know what I know, you know what you know. We can know the same things, we can know different things, and yet remain what we are. But according to divine simplicity, there is no distinction between God and, say, God's knowledge. There's no distinction between God and God's love. According to the theory of divine simplicity, if you refer to divine knowledge or divine love, what are you picking out? You're picking out divinity, which you don't know what it is, by the way. So, the theory of divine simplicity is meant to be a bit of what we call negative theology, or I've thrown this word at you before, apophaticism. Remember that word? Apophaticism. The idea that we negate things about God. We say what God is not. Negative theology, divine simplicity is a bit of negative theology. So, what are some criticisms of divine simplicity? It's not at all divine simplicity is not at all popular with the so-called theistic personalists. And here's a very famous criticism of divine simplicity, which comes from a guy named Alvin Plantinga. And he picks up on this third category of simplicity that we talked about, where I say God is not distinct from God's properties, like God's love, God's knowledge, etc. Plantinga says this: if God is identical to God's love, and if love is a property that something can have, then God is a property. But no person is a property, God is a person, therefore God is not simple. Well, you can see how Plantinga's theory of God is just shot through and through with the conviction that God must be a person, right? Once you abandon that mantra, as Aquinas, for example, does, you're not going to get into that problem that Plantinga has. But Plantinga makes a more fundamental mistake even than that. Namely, that Plantinga thinks that when we talk about God's love, by love we must mean the exact same thing we mean when I say that you love or I love. According to the classical theist, since we don't know what God is, we really cannot know what God's love amounts to. But we can rule divine love out from being a property. That is something we can do. So, I think divine simplicity is a crucial thing for trying to understand where the classical theist is coming from. I think that if you really want to understand this stuff, if you really want to understand, say, Aquinas, you've really got to get into the divine simplicity stuff. Reread the chapter of your book on divine simplicity. If you lost the chapter, let me know. I can send you some substitute readings. You could also look up on the, you can look up lots and lots of articles online about divine simplicity. Some I like more than others, so I won't try to prejudice you. Hey, you could look up my doctoral dissertation, which was all about divine simplicity. It was all about divine simplicity and that crazy problem of existence that I think Savannah did a very nice job of talking about during her presentation. So, if you have questions, put them in the comment box below. Put them down there. Divine simplicity will be one of those really fun things you can talk about in your final paper for this class. Hey, hope you're all doing well. Don't hesitate to email me if you have any questions, concerns, worries, what have you. I'll see you next time. Our next lecture is, I forgot what our next lecture is about. Next lecture will be posted next week. I'm going to be doing about 5 of these between now and the end of the semester. Put some thought into your final paper for me, would you? Do a nice job for your final paper. I'll give you prompts for your final paper here in the next 10 days or so. Since we're not doing presentations, make me happy, okay? Okay, see ya.